Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday Satsang. It's uh, it's a different kind of Sunday today. We are live on YouTube for the first time also. So let's see how that goes. As I was just sitting here with you, what came as to be shared is if we find ourselves in a place where we become comfortable with being quiet, and quietness here, the word quiet, is a multi-layered label that we can look at together for a few minutes here. So if we find in our life, in our work, in our relationships, in our alone time, if there is a preference being cultivated where quietness is valued, is preferred, is chosen again and again over the chatter, whether that's verbal chatter, need to have a conversation or need to have a small talk with someone, or whether that's the mental chatter where ruminating about the past or worrying about the future or complaining in the present of how it should have been or how it should not be. So all of that non-quietness is not preferred anymore. Not to say that it may not arise, but when it does arise, there is a tendency to choose to move towards letting it be and not adding another layer of that my inner realm shouldn't be like this or should be like this. All this narrative, this tendency to energetically try and dictate how something should or shouldn't be, how I should or shouldn't be, how the other should or shouldn't be, or how life should be or shouldn't be. That's where the suffering lies. That's definitely one area where the suffering lies. And if we find our energy withdrawing from that play that we play with ourselves every moment, sometimes, just because something is running away from being quiet, something is running away from a sense of void, a sense of emptiness that is always here. And in order to avoid that, even unconsciously, we have been habituated by life to always be thinking something, saying something, doing something, and never for a moment be able to stop. And that stopping, if it happens, may very well be the beginning of the suffering being shown as suffering, being shown as a narrative and not what actually is, not as reality anymore. We may find ourselves inclining towards maybe even spending more time alone, or nurturing relationships that value silence, that value no drama in a way, where there feels to be a lightness of being, maybe a friendship or a family relationship or teacher or teaching. This quietness, this inclination towards not feeding the narrative, the belief anymore, is also a byproduct of being able to see and confirm for oneself that what I'm really looking for is not to be found out there. It's not to be found in the flow of life. It's not to be found in circumstance. It's not to be found in how I am as a person. It's not to be found in converting all my weaknesses into my strengths. It's not to be found in all my relationships being pleasant without any conflict. It's not to be found in everyone liking me and loving me. It's not to be found in fame or money. What can be found in there, in all these things, in all these pursuits, is pleasure. And what I am looking for really, actually, is happiness for myself in this life, which has been mistakenly believed to be in pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And that is why all this chatter and drama and effort that goes out in each moment in trying and manipulating life so that it turns out to be pleasant for myself and for my loved ones. And what may happen, that it may be seen that what I'm really looking for is not pleasure. because maybe there are many pleasures that I may have gained in life: good health, wealth, great relationships, maybe success and fame also. And as I receive the pleasure, what I thought I would get from it doesn't seem to be fulfilled. I either very quickly move on to finding next pleasure as a fix to this addiction, or to find something to do to avoid this sense of emptiness again. Or if I'm lucky, if I'm really lucky, I may just realize that, oh, I just got what I thought if I get, everything will be fine. And it's not. And if that happens strongly enough, or if it happens many times enough for someone, it may dawn upon them that then what is it? That may bring this sense of fulfillment that I think pleasure will give me. And that sense of contentment, that sense of not needing, existentially not needing anymore, is really what I'm looking for. And it's been projected onto the attainment, the achievement of pleasure in life. That's the misunderstanding. It's not anybody's fault to misunderstand this. Life is designed a certain way that we as humans are inevitably made to believe deeply that it seems to be the truth, that what I really need and what I really want is good circumstance in life for me to be happy. And yet the recognition may happen that the circumstance can go my way or not. Sometimes even in unfavorable circumstances, I may find myself satisfied and contented and not suffering in a sense that something's missing and something needs to change anymore. And on the contrary, in the times of pleasure, sometimes in the time of favorable circumstance, I may find myself irritated and frustrated or afraid. And not really fulfilled within, still feeling like that something's missing. And these are the times of grace when really, in our own experience, we can confirm that what we're really looking for is not to be found in circumstance. Circumstance plays out on the spectrum of pleasure and pain. Extreme pleasure or extreme pain, and everything in between. The conjunction of the combination of the recognition, of the understanding that, number one, life is designed to be either pleasure or pain. In one moment, I may feel pleasant, the weather is nice, I feel good within, I have a nice company with a friend, and life feels good. It was like, okay, I'm sitting in a nice restaurant. And the next moment, a call may come and I may receive a bad news. And life in that moment turns into pain. The nature of the flow of life is pleasure or pain. Sometimes pleasure, sometimes pain. Few times pleasure, many times pain. Or many times pleasure, few times pain, depending on how my experience is designed to be perceived. So the combination of number one, that life is designed to be either pleasure or pain in every moment of experience. And what I'm really looking for, my happiness, my completeness, my contentment in this life is not to be found in the flow of life. And conceptually speaking, they are two concepts. And yet it's not a different understanding. As I get to see that life cannot be pleasure, 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 it is designed to be pleasure and pain. There is a taking back of energy that may happen that was so involved in the flow of life attitudinally that it failed to see that life will turn out to be pain sometimes. The events will take place that I may not like. And I may sometimes put all my efforts in something and it may not result in what I want it to be or expect it to be. And when that energy is taken back, it is slowly revealing that actually what I'm looking for is not there anyway. And that is the natural arising of a sense of detachment from the flow of life, where I am, well, initially, where I may even physically detach from life until that understanding is grounding. And that can be for days or weeks, or we may go to retreats. Could be even for years. But as that understanding grounds in oneself that the flow of life is the flow of life, and my happiness is as I turn inward, my happiness is not in the flow of life. And that may even lead to a more dynamic participation in life, because now I'm not attached to the flow of life in the sense that it has to work out for me. Because now I don't need the flow of life to go a certain way, to go my way. So now I'm free of a sense of self-fulfilling prophecy that I was projecting onto the flow of life while I was participating in life. And now I can just participate freely, innocently, without any sense of self-gain or without any fear of losing the self. So then the question becomes that my happiness, my fulfillment, my contentment If it's not to be found in the flow of life, where is it to be found? And it's a very valid question. If not there, then where? This question in itself arises when there is enough quietness in the system that has really assimilated the concept, the understanding that it's not out there. And there very well may be a grief period where one feels deceived even in life, where sometimes a seeker may feel like that I wasted so many years of my life looking for it in the wrong place. So what I'm really looking for is to be found not in the flow of life, it's to be found in my attitude towards the flow of life. It is my attitude that may result in suffering, or that may result in peace of mind or absence of suffering, which in itself is a label for happiness that is available for Gurleen in this life, for you in this lifetime. So what is my attitude towards the flow of life that may causing, or that may very well itself be the unhappiness or suffering? And according to this framework, that attitude that is the cause of suffering is the attitude of personal doership and an attitude of attachment to outcome. attitude of personal doership can be briefly defined as the sense or the belief that I am in control of everything that I think, I feel, I say, I do. And so is everybody else. And it's all personal. So it all means this or that about me. So the flow of life is in control of what we all think or do or say. The sense, the belief that I am the doer. So I am the cause of all the good and bad outcomes through the words or actions taking place through me. And likewise for the other, that you are the doer and all the good and bad outcomes are because of what you are in control of. That is everything you think, you feel, you do, you say. And then it is personal. Because if you say something or you do something that delivers pain to me, you are the doer of it. So I hate you or I love you, depending on whether you deliver to me pain or pleasure. And likewise, if I say or do something that delivers pain to you, then I am bound to feel guilt and shame because I was the. It is this belief that is resulting in an attitude that is an attitude of suffering. And the other branch of this attitude is the attitude of attachment to outcome. And as it sounds, it is an attitude that believes very deeply that what I'm really looking for is to be found in what I do, what you do, what life is. So it is the belief that my completeness, my happiness is to be found in how life turns out to be, how I turn out to be, and what you are like. So basically, that my happiness, my completeness is to be found in life being pleasure, 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 and always pleasure for me. And if it ever results in pain, that is taken as an attack on who I am. It's taken as an attack on my completeness. And hence, that sense of personal doership reinforces that. And because you were the deliverer of that pain, you are the doer, you are to blame. And if I were the deliverer of that pain for myself, if an action took place and the outcome was not as I preferred it to be, so that is pain for me. And because that pain, because of attachment to outcome, is taken as an attack on who I am, and that sense of personal doership is bound to design a very deep-rooted sense of shame and guilt. So it's the load of guilt and shame for myself for everything that I believe that I'm the doer of, and that load of blame and hatred and resentment for the other because of what is believed that they are the doer of, is that load of suffering, is that attitude towards the flow of life that is the attitude of suffering. So then what is the attitude of happiness? Or what is the attitude of non-suffering? Again, according to this framework, the attitude that leads to happiness or peace of mind in daily living is the attitude of, we can say, non-doership and non-attachment to outcome. And as Roger, our teacher, beautifully puts it, that this attitude of non-doership and non-attachment is not an active attitude or belief or a thought process of believing that I'm not the doer, the other is not the doer, or my happiness is not to be found in the flow of life. These concepts are very useful for the misunderstanding to be taken out of the system. However, the attitude of non-suffering is really an absence of the attitude of suffering. So the attitude of non-doership is just the absence of the attitude of personal doership. It's not the presence of an attitude of non-doership. All that interpretation and narrative at the very deep-rooted level just becomes absent. So that load of shame and guilt and blame and hatred doesn't arise anymore. And life flows still as pleasure and pain. The pleasures are enjoyed, the pains are tolerated. And yet that sense of that the flow of life needs to be different for me to be okay is absent. The undoing of the attitude of suffering can begin to happen as these concepts or similar concepts start landing within our system more and more. And when they start acting out or arising as reminders in our daily activities, when we find ourselves habitually just going back to the attitude of suffering, where we find ourselves just blaming ourselves for something or blaming the other for every little thing, that we may find ourselves that, oh, blame is arising, oh, resentment is arising. And then these concepts can take over in a very useful way, where they counter that suffering narrative. And there's nothing that needs to be remembered. There's no homework. So it's not our job to take notes of these concepts and then affirm them. Well, that may happen if that's what happens, but that doesn't need to be done, because the very concept says that there is no doer. So as a doer, if I take on the charge of undoing the suffering, that's just more suffering on top of existing suffering. That's just more sense of doership on top of the existing facade of doership. So the very concept itself says there's no doer. And that's the good news in a way, because then I'm off duty. I don't need to keep all this weight on my shoulders and take the mission of ending my own suffering. Because it is clearly seen that I wasn't the one. So life put the suffering in place and life undoes it. Another beautiful pointer that Roger uses. Life puts suffering in place and life undoes it. So it's not my job. I can let life take over, not that there is a choice and not that it isn't already that way. But now there can be a conscious relaxing and a sense of surrender, knowing that just being interested in something like this, just feeling quiet enough within my system where I want to spend more time listening to something like this or talking about something like this or thinking about something like this is already a sign that life is undoing the suffering that's in place. This attitude of non-suffering is also, or can also be seen as a byproduct of a turning inward. Turning inward and recognizing the very background, the very all-pervasive awareness, consciousness, thisness of the nature of experience, the nature of me. The recognition may happen where one recognizes oneself as not the body, not even the human body-mind organism, but as the formless awareness, isness. There are many names that are taken for it, and yet it cannot be named. This, when unveils itself to itself, it is clearly recognized in one's own experience that even the experiencing is arising within this and falling away in this, morphing into one form of experience to another form of experience within this. It is made of this. Everything that is perceived feelings, emotions, sensations, sense of body, thoughts, this camera, laptop, this room, the walls, is arising within this. All the sounds, the sound of this voice, the understanding of the words, the agreeing upon or not agreeing upon to what is registered as sound. All of that is arising, playing out, and falling away within this, as this, and this is seen to be all there is. So that must be I, not I as Gurleen or I as this human being, but this I is the source of Gurleen, the source of this human being. So I as Gurleen naturally, choicelessly surrenders to the I that is the source of Gurleen. So as this recognition lands in the system of Gurleen, the attitude of non-suffering is a byproduct. Gurleen now inherently knows that what she is and where she comes from is within, is the very source of everything that Gurleen is and that Gurleen experiences. So where is the place of clinging to the flow of life? Where is the place for blaming the other? Where is the place for blaming myself? When it is clearly seen that it's all a play within the source of all there is, and it itself is all there is. There's no source and all there is. They're not two. There's no separation. So where is the place for hatred towards anything? Because there is no other. And this is not, well, these words are a concept. Absolutely, they're a concept. These words are not to be believed. These words are not to be written down as some prophecy and then repeated and taken as, oh, now I know this. No, these words are merely a pointer to, or an invitation even, to see if there is some curiosity or even some longing or yearning for this to open up in the system. Just using these concepts even skeptically, if that what feels natural, and then investigating for oneself that what is this? What are these concepts saying, and is there any validity to them? That maybe will be a healthier approach than just taking them as the truth without really testing them out in our own experience. And the quietness that we began with, um, it can be of many types. It can just be a quietness where we are just comfortable sitting in silence with the other. It can be a quietness where we find ourselves comfortable or just silent within ourselves in our own company, where we don't have to create thoughts. Not that we are the doer or the creator of those thoughts, but where we are comfortable with whatever our inner experience happens to be. There's a quietness, a non involvement in the inner arisings. And it is only when this quietness becomes natural, a natural choice, that this opening of oneself as the very source of the inner, the outer, and actually there's no separation between the inner and the outer, but this opening to really recognize this that is. This is always here. This is always is. So it doesn't need our quietness to be itself. It is always as it is, regardless of it being recognized by this person, this body mind organism or not. And even the recognition of this experientially for me is an arising within this as it is, impersonal. There's nothing that the me can do to recognize its source. And hence the concept, there is no doer. Before I open the space for conversation, I want to just put it out there once more that everything that is shared here, and for that matter, that has ever been shared, is a concept and not the truth. So if it is possible, take it lightly. Take it lightly and let it unfold within your system. Feel free to raise your hands, everyone, if there Are any questions or comments? And Raj.
Hello.
Hello, Raj. How are you?
Fine. And you?
Very well, very well. Thank you.
So my question, since there is only one, therefore there cannot be the individual will. There is only God's will. And as an individual will is an illusion then. And this has been proven in science, in neuroscience. So that not my question. My question is everything predestined? That is, since my birth, all my actions, all my thoughts, all my emotion, whatever person I have met in my work or in my life, were all these events predetermined since my birth, or even since the Big Bang?
Thank you for your question, Raj. And I'm sure this is the question of many, and it was my question at one time. According to this framework, this concept, this teaching, yes, it is all predestined since the beginning of the beginning, if there is a beginning. And having said that, it is still a concept and not the truth. So, how this conceptually makes sense is in the experiential recognition of the very source of me and the source of experiencing, as that opens up for oneself, which we can call an awakening experience or a oneness experience in wisdom frameworks or spiritual teachings. So when that happens for oneself, or even in a psychedelic experience, sometimes one can experience the dissolution of boundaries and can perceive that everything is within somehow a non-separate oneness, non-dual existence that is playing out as duality or as many. When that is something that it is experienced, it is seen that it is all one unfolding, one massive, unfathomable unfolding. And and a human mind cannot know if this is random or orderly, if this is designed all throughout. So basically what I'm trying to say is that a character in the book cannot know if the whole book is written. The character is only experiencing the very sentence it is on, living out what the script is in that sentence, that present moment, in this sense, in this case. So in that sense, for Gurleen and for Gurleen's end of suffering, it's all predestined. And what that does is that it takes off that load of guilt and shame from all the past seeming actions that I thought that I was the doer of and delivered a bad outcome. And it relieves me of all the blame and hatred and resentment towards the other, towards life, or towards even God, the conceptual God that we blame that gave me whatever was taken to be painful in life. So for Gurleen and Gurleen's happiness, according to this framework, everything is predestined. And another way to look at it, of how we can come to understand, is to see that it's not in my control. What happens is not in Gurleen's control. And even looking at it in the flow of life, where I was born, what parents I was born to, geographically where I was born, which economic system, how financially well off my family was, who my family members were, where did I go to school, political system, what time did. So all of that contributed to design this system of Gurleen, which is a certain way. I have my own flaws. I have my own ways of reacting to different ideas and situations. And I have different strengths where in some situations, Gurleen happens to be very useful. And all of that is based on everything that I was not in control of, who I was born to, where I was born, and what experiences I had, and what effect they had on me as a person. So having come to see this and understand this, so then whatever I do in each moment is based on my genes, my biological blueprint, when the sperm and the egg came together, and conditioning, which is updating in each moment also. It's not to say that it's fixed. So predestined can also come with an idea of that, well, it's all fixed then. But that's the limitation of our thinking. But predestined does mean that if my conditioning were to update in this moment, and I may become a different version of a person that I am, that is also in the can. Ramesh used to say that the whole movie is in the can. It has been directed, produced, acted, the climax, everything is already there. And Roger uses an amazing example where he says like a bomb in like some festival or something. When you blow a bomb, you already see that the impact has taken place, because the moment you light it up, the impact is already there. So conceptually speaking, yes, it's all predestined.
It seems to me that the new free will and predestination, they're connected. That is, one implies the other. If we have no free will, no individual free will, then everything is predestined. One implies the other. Is it? Do you see it is connected?
So are you talking about one action leading to another action leading to like
No,
going?
no. If we have no free will, if the individual free will does not exist, then this implies that everything is predestined. Is it? Do
So
we
then
have this connection? Do you
according
see
to
this connection?
according to how I understand it, individual will exists.
But it
So
is illusion.
well,
It is illusion, yeah.
but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Like
Of
this
course,
body exists in this moment, and it is
it
an
is,
illusion, right?
yeah,
And
the
yet I
state
still
is,
have to eat and cook and take a bath every day and yeah, groom this body and buy clothes for it. So I still have to live as if this illusion is there,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah,
individual will all exists for sure.
apparently, yes. Yeah.
And what this framework really beautifully explains is that God's will, when we say all there is God's will, everything that ever happens is according to God's will. And God here meaning what we were labeling as this, the source, not a separate, all powerful entity that's controlling all of it, but really the source that itself has manifested as all of this. So God's will manifests in the form of the individual will. So my will and God's will are not two. So when I'm hungry, and if I feel like getting up and opening the fridge and checking out what I can eat, that is God's will playing through my will. But I do feel like I have the choice of whether I open the fridge or whether I call a restaurant to order some food, or whether I just feel like, let me just sleep. I don't feel like eating right now. So all of that is how the individual will manifest, and that is actually God's will playing through all of us. So there is no contradiction between it being predestined and individual will. They're actually, the predestination plays itself as the individual will. And I don't feel like that I am a slave of life. I do feel like that I had a choice to announce this satsang and come on Zoom, and you felt like you had the free will to join today. But having said all of that, everything in life had to come in place. There had to be electricity, there had to be internet. Your life, your day had to unfold a certain way for you to be here and for me to be here. So it's always bigger than the individual will, and yet the individual will exists, and it is all predestined. And there need not be a contradiction to that. It's a paradox, but it's not a contradiction.
If everything is predestined, then there cannot be karma, and this whole theory of reincarnation, as in the Hindu religion, breaks down. There cannot be reincarnation if I am not the doer and everything is predestined. It makes no sense.
The theory of karma does not need a doer to play out. Karma is just action, the idea of movement. So every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So the theory of karma and even reincarnation doesn't need a separate doer or millions and zillions of separate doers for it to play. It's not my karma because I am not the doer, and yet there is karma. So there may happen an integration between understanding karma as impersonal. The theory of karma seems like a contradiction to predestination or no free will, no actual free will. Let's say it like that, because it seems like that karma comes from free will, and it does come of free will, depending on what we mean by free will. It's not my free will, but it is coming. So the action is taking place. But when karma is taken seriously, I feel like I because I am the doer, I need to do good actions. And so I'm not punished for those actions in future lifetimes, believing that they will be my lifetimes. But Gurleen won't be there in those lifetimes. So the idea of me means that I believe myself to be this person. But in the theory of reincarnation, when this body dies, Gurleen dies. Gurleen vanishes. So whose life will it be? The one who was trying to do the good actions as the doer doesn't exist anymore. But though the actions, as the concept says, it is seen to be this one big unfathomable movement. It's like the ocean. One wave arises here and the other waves arises there, and they are interconnected. So that's karma. And destination and karma, again, are not a contradiction. The theory of karma is how the game is designed to play out, the predestined game. So it's like the rules of the game. The stadium will be this big. The goal means that the player needs to do that, and this is what the meaning of winning team will be and the losing team will be. But it's all still a game, and it's predestined.
So reincarnation can still. So you still believe reincarnation is real?
I don't know if if it's real or not, but I can see how it can exist. It's like a pool of collective knowledge and unresolved emotions and data, basically, if we want to use that analogy here. So it's like a big data center of unsolved bugs of code, let's say. And then a new birth is taking place, and then that pool may just mix up some load, and then it's plugged into the blueprint of the body mind organism as just something that can come within the genes of that new life. So it's not that baby's karma that they're getting, but it is karma that they are getting. It's just unresolved data, unresolved bugs or unresolved stuff in the consciousness that is just impersonally, with who knows what algorithm, is getting distributed within itself.
But it is no longer Gurlin. it is
Well, yes,
a new ego. It will be a new
exactly.
ego.
It's the new person
Yeah.
who may or may not
This,
believe in karma.
yeah. This is what a few others, many, very few. What you have just said, I have read it. I have encountered it in maybe free sources, free persons, if you want. Only free. It's very rare what you're saying.
Well, all thanks to Roger, and I'm sure Roger will say
Yeah.
all thanks to Ramesh. So
Yeah. Now, what about causality? So, we feel that there is time and space, but in the absolute, there is no time and no space. If there is no time, then all events are happening simultaneously in a way, as if all events are already in the CD.
yeah, well, that's exactly what
Then
Ramesh says.
then if this is the case, if there is no time, then there is no causality.
Again, it's a very good question. And it's a question of paradox. The answer is yes and no. So there is no causality. There is no cause to this or this, that at least that a human mind can fathom. However, in our daily life, relatively speaking, um, I turn on the switch and the light turns on if there is electricity. So there is a cause of everything. I turn on the stove and the water starts boiling after a certain time. So, or if I touch that stove, hot stove, I may burn my hand. So the cause of burning my hand is that hot stove or my carelessness. So many causes for that. So yes, there is no cause for this. And yet how it plays out is cause and effect. And that cause and effect is really a different way of saying karma.
And as if for me, there is no causality, as if all the events are programmed in this way. The sequence of events are already programmed, just like in a movie or in cartoons. The images are already in sequence. They're just a sequence. And this sequence gives rise to the illusion of causality.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome, Raj. Thank you for your questions. We have Branko.
Hi, Gulin.
Hello, Ranko. How are you?
Very nice. And you?
Very well, thank you.
Great. So I just wanted to say about being quiet. For me, recently that happens automatically. So it's not even on the level of the preference, but it just happens. And it happens even in some situations during my daily life when I'm even in conversation with some other people. So my system automatically detects where we are going to suffering topic and things like this, and it just stops there. And I can't even bypass it anymore. And it's a very weird conversation because I'm not giving what the other side wants, you know. So energy is a little bit cut off. And it's very strange for the other side, for, let's say, normal people.
Yeah, Ranko, where's the drama? I want the drama.
Yeah. And it's really futile to explain what is happening in this side.
Yeah.
So I was trying to see what is really happening with this, how this mechanism of suffering is actually operating. And I see in other people that's basically a form of excitement. Drama is excitement in a way, but perverted excitement which is not in a way natural, like when it comes from the peace or when it comes from happiness. But it's kind of maybe a form of pleasure at the beginning, but it has a downside of it. Because in the body, it will react that probably our hormones will rise up, like adrenaline or something like that. And in the beginning, it's good feeling, but after that, like alcohol, like drugs, you have a downside of it. When you become sober, and that's suffering, basically. That's a suffering reaction. And in that suffering reaction, we want to avoid feeling suffering. So we try to cover it up again with something which excites us, like more drama.
Yeah.
So it becomes a very vicious circle. You can't get out of it. You are more and more into it, and you can't really see when it's happening.
Yeah.
So I also see when I'm in that kind of conversation, I just stop. A very awkward conversation because it will no more will go further. And the other side, I know suffering will happen there. But what to do? Because in this side, there is no material for me to be pulled into suffering. Totally no material. No one to suffer.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm very happy to hear that. And it's so that may come with such gratitude where one may find that, oh wow, like who knew that it was possible to be quiet in the face of something that is inviting noise, that is in a way implying or expecting you to be louder. And if a quietness just stays in response to that invitation or that expectation, it's even a surprise in the beginning. It's like, what? What's going on?
Yeah,
and it may take many times to ground oneself into realizing, oh, it's okay to be quiet. Not that I have a choice, but yeah, it's okay. And then at a certain point, a compassion may arise for the other because it is clearly seen that I, and probably there might be some other areas where we might still be stuck in drama in our own loop or not, but there was a time when we were, and we were unaware of it. So out of that, a very like almost humble in quality, but compassion can arise where a conversation may still happen, verbally speaking, because initially we wouldn't know how to be in the situation because there's nothing coming from inside. But the participation may still happen. and yet from a place of, as exactly as you said, like how excitement, a genuine excitement can come from a peace, a sense of no suffering. And there's a sense of excitement. We're just trying to avoid what we'll see when there's no excitement. So there may a very active participation that may happen in those kind of situations where you may still be quiet within, and yet the conversation may still go on in a way that that is not as awkward as it might be when we don't know how to participate. And that's just because it's new. Yeah, and that's amazing though. It's a lovely place to be in too. It's a very pleasant surprise and a very wonderful time to learn how to function again from a place of no suffering. Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I'm still like trying to find a way to end the conversation. So usually what I say, like, everything will be okay, don't worry, and things like this. This is the only thing that makes sense. Because I know that maybe the other person probably won't understand what I'm trying to say, but
yeah,
what else?
Yeah.
Just sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Wonderful. Thank you, Ranko. Ranjan.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, how are you, Ranjan?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Great. Your voice is breaking. Can you say that again?
Are you still in Goa?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, actually, my observation is like, as we discussed today, everything is happening by itself. And, even I can observe in life like events in a day. So everything flows. There is no friction in that. So it happens. Earlier, there was a lot of friction that it has to, what will happen like this, or what should happen. These kind of thoughts, lot of thoughts were running, and it was obstructing the flow of life. But more observing this,
Ranjan, your voice
regard
is phasing in and out. I'm not sure if that's the internet or...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Switch on. Yeah, on this reincarnation part, is it related to desires that it happens? It's like the consciousness, their body form, that is because there are some unfulfilled desires, some actions were not complete. Because of that, the consciousness try to take another body and manifest itself in that form. Is that the right understanding?
So are you asking why reincarnation happens? Is that what you're asking?
Because it is not fully manifested or consciousness, or it's because of unfulfilled desire. One hand, or we don't have any thing that goes on movie like.
So reincarnation may happen, may not happen. I can totally see how it can happen. I can also see if it doesn't happen. Sure. Like it's a concept that I hold loosely because I don't know if it happens or it doesn't happen. There may be some data in this. So in Gurleen's awareness, in the awareness that is living as Gurleen, there may be some data that may feel has come from somewhere else or someplace else, or people call it ancestral or generational trauma or blueprint, or they may call it past life experiences or past life data on unhealed trauma or emotions or whatnot. They could be both, they could be none, they could be totally something else. So it's not really about why reincarnation happens. It may happen, it may not happen, but because this one whole pool of, you can say, consciousness or energy, cosmic flow, is playing itself out in a way that it seems to be like reincarnation is going on in this unfolding. And there may be many people, and even in the scriptures, it is so clearly written down of how it happens and how many lives after you get a human birth. And so all of those things, they probably have gone deeper within oneself, deeper enough to find out all this information and download all this information and then present it in the form that they have. Now, reincarnation to me is just this body falling away, mixing in the 5 elements that this manifestation seems to be made of, and then something else emerging out of it. And that something else and Gurleen are totally different, seemingly, entities, and yet there might be a little bit of Gurleen in there. And we can call it reincarnation. So there are many teachers that would give a much clearer view or explanation on reincarnation and how it works, and they may have proper labels of even describing of what leaves the body and then it takes on another body, and they probably have researched it within or without very well. And but for me, reincarnation is just consciousness playing itself out in this manifestation in the way that happens to be called as reincarnation or karma. Because karma and reincarnation to play out, so for karma to play out, there's reincarnation. For reincarnation to play out, there's concept of karma. So if that's how the game is played, then yeah, it exists. And if that's not how the game is played, then maybe it doesn't exist. But then who cares?
But yeah, you mentioned Gurleen as awareness, right? That how that awareness linked to body, mind, or body, because we say self, right? The self ever, but only not recognized, or what was veiled till now. These years, so why we research, find out who has done research, like searching for the ego, or what happened on behalf of ego, not conscious or aware. What is that? Because more and more we are aware, that more and more aware.
Your voice has phased out again, Ranjan.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there any expansion that, because I remember we are aware from childhood, somewhat we are more, I don't know that what was concealed that, or what was made we fall into trap, or maybe pleasure, or more identifying. Maybe it is because it started with pleasure experience and then we started seeking more of it. That's where, and that I don't know what is that seeking that pleasure and forgetting the awareness. Uh, what is the link actually here?
Hmm.
And also identification with the body. What is that identification with the body? That is the source, right? That we feel that is the doer. There is somewhere I am the body that is strongly believed or something, or I am the Ranjan or something.
Hmm. So, very valid question. Let me organize how I want to address it. The identification with the body-mind organism is necessary for life to play out as it does, as we know it. So that is not the problem, is what I want to say first and foremost. That is not the cause of suffering. That may be something that is held on to so strongly that if a wisdom teaching tells you that the body arises within you, and that may make no sense, because I'm like, well, I am this body. So it's a concept that is needed for life to play out as it does. So for Ranjan and Gurleen to have a conversation, every day we wake up and we find ourselves in this body, or as this body, living life as this body, being addressed. Everyone addresses me as this body when they see this body, right? The cause of suffering, as we very initially said, was the deeply ingrained belief in the sense of personal doership and attachment to outcome. And those are psychological beliefs that were put in place by life, which is inevitable to be there, for the flow of life to take place as it is taking place. But knowing, being the lucky ones to really being able to pinpoint, okay, sense of personal doership, sense of attachment to outcome, and then being able to investigate it, what does that really mean in experience. So in the flow of life as a baby, yes, there is only awareness. There's no awareness of the body. The eyes just open and something is being seen, and something is hungry, and crying is heard, and it's the baby crying, but the baby has no sense of that, oh, I am crying because I'm hungry. It's just automatically going on. And then the baby starts recognizing the parents, and then starts responding to when they smile. The baby smiles. The baby doesn't know. The baby maybe is not even happy. It doesn't know if it is, if smile means that. It's just kind of automatically copying or mimicking what is being perceived in the visual field. And then slowly and steadily, as life progresses, there's so much we learn. We touch something, the baby touches something and realizes that this is a part of me, and that is different. The table is different, or the bed, the cot is different. So just that sense of separation starts to build, where the human development and starts to understand that, okay, this is me, and everything else outside of this is not me. And that sense of me is necessary to function in life. Otherwise, I'd just sit in fire and I wouldn't care, because fire is me and body, like, there's no separation. So that happens. But then as we live in a society where there's already a very strong sense of belief in personal doership and attachment to outcome, the family systems, the society is already built on believing that our happiness is to be found in flow of life, or happiness is to be found in acceptance from society, or acceptance from relatives, or acceptance by teachers and principal. So then the child has to be trained in a way that they become functional in a society as it functions.
Yeah,
So then reward and punishment happens.
yeah,
And the child unconsciously just understands that when I do this, I'm rewarded, and I like being rewarded. And when I do this, I am punished, and I don't like being punished. And that is maybe where that seed of my happiness, or I want reward and not punishment. And that is where our authenticity, the natural movement of the system, is hindered. And that's not to anybody's fault. That's just how life develops. So as we were saying in the satsang that Roger beautifully puts it, life puts suffering in place, not our parents, not their parents, not society. They are the instruments through which life happens in the way that it does. In this case, which means that sense of personal doership and attachment to outcome comes into place, and life undoes it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but belief, it is something, it is like a idea or a image stored in the somewhere in the brain or in the body that has very strong hold, and that belief is getting hurt. That is what a hurt or whatever it happens. Why we go for hitting each other or hurting each other? That is the thing. Is this something like the structure is like programmed structure in some part of the brain which we have not accessed, kind of it? Or is it programmed complete body, like each place there is something kind of a separation, some parts of separation?
There could be. It depends on how much of this stuff is in the system. So there could be blocks of energy, of suffering, or of blame, or shame, or hatred, maybe stored in the physical body in the forms of aches and pains, or even illness, a certain autoimmune illness, and now it's more and more out there that the psychosomatic diseases really are because of unresolved emotions or psychological patterns. So yes, those beliefs can be very hardwired in the body itself, in the form of stiffness, or in the form of some stuck emotion itself, which might be so locked in the body that life, if destined, may bring it up in a circumstance or an event, and a catharsis may happen, or we may find, let's say, a holistic approach where we go see, for example, an acupuncture practitioner, and they put a pin in our, let's say, in our toe, and like we start sobbing. What is that? So that might be a stuck emotion in the body that just got channeled. So yes, suffering is primarily psychological. It's a psychological belief that in its concentrated form also manifests physically.
Because the root, everybody says that any teacher, that root, finding the source of primordial thought, that is what you say, that is a can in the movie, that is you call that. For me, I thought means it is nothing, something from personal thing. It is kind of a, all this creation itself is a thought in God's mind. Is that what that I thought refers? And finding that source will, it's like you are going back to the source and you see everything as a movie or a played out on the screen, something.
That's a beautiful interpretation of the concept. Yes, it can mean what you exactly said, that going back to the source of the I thought is not, well, the first use of that investigation, and maybe the success of that investigation, would be to see that the I is just a thought and there's no real I. There's no reality to the I. It's just another concept that is so deeply believed in that it is literally has hijacked the whole experience. There's no doer of that I either. So not to say that there's no in charge of putting that I in place or taking that I away. And that reminds me of a beautiful verse that Rumi wrote, that the one who got me here shall take me home. So the one that put the I in place can take it back. So it's not my job.
Yeah, this it points to again surrender.
Yeah.
But this is that the awakening of intelligence? Is that the surrender, when you completely surrender, that you don't think about anything, then that the intelligence will dissolve this thought, or it will take over this organism to function.
Right. It's already the case, Ranjan.
Okay.
It's not something that will happen or will not happen. It's already the case. It's just that this case right now involves Ranjan believing that Ranjan is doing something.
Yeah. It's like doing is happening by that intelligence, but these thoughts from that.
Ranjan is a product of that intelligence.
Yeah.
Ranjan is not outside of that intelligence. So Ranjan doesn't need to be dissolved. Let's take that home today if it lands.
Okay.
Ranjan can live. Ranjan doesn't have to die for enlightenment to happen.
Yeah, it is only sensations in the body. It feels like some, as you mentioned, the tensions due to beliefs or something, that okay, there is, of course, it is the kind of a flushing out of the body, all these things. That says intelligence is itself is flushing out of all this. Because in every, like Nataraja dancing, and below his feet, you can see that there is a kind of a cruel human being, or like a egos person, like that depicts that ego is under the feet of Nataraja. So that reminds there is something kind of a happens, like that surrender also happens in that way. That complete surrender happens. That is, but yeah, that's really, don't know, is it an understanding, or is it a realization, or is it an experience that I don't know really.
It's all of them, all the three words that you said, and yet it's just an absence of needing to know. So that experience may not be needed anymore. I may not need a proof to know that it already is like that. And that is exactly the surrender. Mm-hmm. In this moment, however, is it possible to just let's say, the tensions in the body, even if they are blocks of suffering, let's say, they may not be, they may be. Is it possible to just let it all be? Is it possible to just let the suffering also be? It's okay to not know. It's okay to suffer. It's okay to not get it.
No, it happens. I see suffering, even if it happens, it automatically ends actually. You don't do anything. Like sometime it plays out all day, something, it goes on, but it is not much affect. Of course, there is very uncomfortable things in the body, sensations, uh, and ice plays major role in this kind of thing. Like memory is much more loaded on this thing, or like because you feel a lot of sensation uh,
Mm,
or on this. Uh,
mm,
because some, if you these reptiles, if you keep in some position, then thought everything stops.
mm.
Thinking that part, but I don't know how it is connected.
Interesting. Well, if you find out, please share it. I would love to know how it is.
Yeah, because all meditations focus on that, focusing on this point, keep eyes in
Yeah.
ocean, open it, and but you can't keep it that long. Yes, it's just you can observe it, and yeah.
Thank you, Ranjan.
Thank you.
There is a question from YouTube from Felon Mosque. What is the best healing for inner unrest? Well, first of all, thank you for your question. The very acceptance of the fact that there is unrest, there is restlessness, that acceptance in oneself that, yeah, I am suffering, is already the beginning of bringing rest to it. So the healing for unrest is rest. And what would rest mean can differ very much for each process. It may look like a lot of sleeping physically, or physically resting a lot, or it may look like just spending time alone, or spending time in nature, or listening. For me, it was listening to satsangs. So just listening upon hours and hours and hours of satsang all day, all night. It was what was bringing rest to the inner unrest. So that is what the healing looked like for me and my process. And the best healing is just to accept the uncomfortable presence of the unrest, the restlessness, the uncomfortableness of being when the stopping or the quietening down happens. Is it possible to just let it be there without trying to shove it or dismiss it or distract from it? And then also appreciating and honoring the biological intelligence, the natural movement of when it would be healthy to maybe distract oneself. So if I'm sitting days after days in that unrest, and it may be time to just hang out with a friend, or go out in nature, or so just trusting one's own navigation system, one's own inner guru that has revealed the unrest to us, and then trusting that guidance to bring out the possibility of what needs to happen, not to heal the unrest. It might feel like a totally different tangent that the guidance takes us on, but it might imply its implication may be that the unrest is somehow healed. If I may go dancing, it was like, how is that gonna heal me? But let's say while dancing, some energies move and something is released, or something rearranges itself in a way in the body that suffering entity or mechanism in the body or in the system can be shown or can be seen from a different angle or a different light. And that is what may lead to healing. I hope that answers your question. If there are any further inquiries that or a conversation that you'd like to have, or anybody else, I would invite you to join on Zoom. The link, the meeting ID and password is on YouTube as the channel's banner, and also on the website, which is mentioned on the channel itself. Feel free to join on Zoom next Sunday, every Sunday until announced otherwise. And I'd love to see you and maybe talk with anyone who has anything to ask or share or comment on. As I end, again, take it lightly. And everything that has been said is a description of what may happen and not what needs to be done, because there is no doer that is addressed to here. It's the inevitable implication of using a language that is based in subject-object, that it sounds like instructions of what needs to be done. And that's why another reminder, just take it lightly. As we sign off from this Zoom, this meeting, this satsang from here, let's just not have an agenda of whether I need to remember it, whether I need to not remember it, or it was nonsense, whatever it is. It's okay to just leave it and then see if it finds its way back or not. And both are okay. Both are equally impersonal. Thank you again for your time. I love you all. See you next Sunday.